Happy holidays from the Northern Miner Podcast. My name's Adrian Pocobelli. What a year it has been. And I have to say, I am quietly impressed, maybe not so quietly impressed, at how interesting the natural resources beat is. I would argue it's a fundamental layer of the global news narrative that really doesn't get the attention it deserves. And I can't say I'm sad about it. To a certain degree, I feel like we kind of have this all to ourselves. It's not overplayed. I don't feel like I'm saying a whole bunch of news stories that you've read 20 other places. And that's pretty cool in the news business, if you can do that. So, again, thank you for the support this year. The news does not stop for the holidays. As many of us know, the older we get, the more it's like, oh, it's Christmas. What's the big news story going to be? I remember the tsunami. Of course, there was Syria civil war, 10 to 15 years ago. Still playing out, as we've seen. So we'll see what happens this Christmas. Maybe it'll be a quiet one. Let's see. It's not quiet on the natural resource front. Very interesting developments here out of the DRC. As you may recall from last week, the Democratic Republic of Congo has filed criminal complaints against Apple. And they've been threatening to do this for months, and they finally acted on it last week. Apple has replied, and this all seems to be taking place over Reuters. Interestingly, Apple gave a statement to Reuters after Reuters reported that Congo is filing criminal complaints in France and Belgium over the use of these so-called 3T minerals, tantalum, tin, and tungsten, that are thought to be sourced out of the DRC and laundered through Rwanda, who is thought to be supporting the M23 rebels, but who denies it. So a complicated story. We've been following it all year. And now it seems like Congo's tact in order to put pressure on this situation is to target the buyers. And of course, the elephant in the room of the buyer of these minerals is Apple, according to Congo. And of course, these rebel groups fund themselves, as we saw in Myanmar, by the selling of these natural resources, right? So here we are, again, natural resources at the core of these military conflicts. So here was Apple's response to the DRC's criminal complaint in France and Belgium. Quote, as conflict in the region escalated earlier this year, we notified our suppliers that their smelters and refiners must suspend sourcing tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold from the DRC and Rwanda, end quote, Apple said in its statement. So Apple is claiming that earlier this year, they notified their suppliers that their smelters and refiners must suspend sourcing tin, tantalum, and tungsten and gold from the DRC and Rwanda. Apple continues, we took this action because we were concerned it was no longer possible for independent auditors or industry certification mechanisms to perform the due diligence required to meet our high standards. So to paraphrase, from my perspective, it sounds like Apple does not have the ability, according to themselves, to actually verify that these minerals are not coming from the Congo. Quote, we recognize the situation in the region is very challenging, and we have increased our support to organizations that do vital work helping communities, end quote. So Apple replies, and it's kind of interesting how the story unfolds, because then we see a headline that says Apple says it has told suppliers to stop buying minerals from Congo. And that is also Reuters on December 17th, on the same day. So it's unclear when they are telling their suppliers to stop sourcing minerals from the DRC and Rwanda, because this other headline seems to say that this is kind of a new development, that they're telling their suppliers to stop. But from Apple's statement, it seems like something that they said earlier this year. Now, Congo's lawyers have replied, and this is December 18th. And here's the headline, again from Reuters. Congo lawyers say Apple's supply chain statement must be verified. So I think Congo's lawyers are saying, okay, if you said earlier this year that you told your suppliers to stop sourcing metals from the eastern DRC, these so-called 3T minerals, tungsten, tantalum, and tin, then you have to prove that you did that. International lawyers for the Democratic Republic of Congo welcomed Apple's decision to stop sourcing minerals from there due to worsening conflict, but said they would press ahead with their cases against the company in Europe. Criminal complaints were filed against Apple subsidiaries in France and Belgium this week on behalf of Congo, accusing the tech firm of using conflict minerals in its supply chain. And Belgium can't be happy about this. with the sordid history that exists with King Leopold II in the Congo. Congo is a major source of tin, tantalum, and tungsten, so-called 3T minerals used in computers and mobile phones, but some artisanal miners are run by armed groups involved in massacres, rapes, and other crimes, say UN experts and rights groups. Apple said on Tuesday that it strongly disputes the claims and has told suppliers they must not use the minerals in question sourced from Congo or Rwanda. The lawyers representing Congo said on Wednesday they welcomed the statement with, quote, satisfaction and caution. And here are the lawyers who said in a statement to Reuters, quote, Apple's statements about changes to its supply chain will have to be verified on the ground with facts and figures to support them. Apple's statements do not change the past and the crimes that are alleged to have been committed. End quote. They added, saying it was now up to the French and Belgian judges to rule on the case. So Congo not backing down here, saying, if there's anything that can be proved, we are going to continue to pursue this. And this is interesting here too, so it gets right to the heart of the matter. Because in this second article, we once again have the quote from Apple. As conflict in the region escalated earlier this year, we notified our suppliers that their smelters and refiners must suspend sourcing tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold from the DRC and Rwanda. End quote, Apple said in its statement on Tuesday, using an abbreviation for the Congo's full name. And here's the rub. It did not say when suppliers were notified. Excellent point. So Apple's saying they cannot verify for certain where their suppliers are getting their minerals, and also saying that they did tell their suppliers, quote, earlier this year, end quote, that they must stop sourcing the minerals from the Congo and Rwanda. So it's going to be interesting because if DRC proves this case, you could see it making some pretty big headlines. Continuing on, we have another huge development here with Barrick in Mali. Maybe you heard about it. Barrick seeks fair resolution in Mali through arbitration. So we opened last show with the situation in Mali with Barrick and really how Mark Bristow had been painted into a corner with the government there who was basically, to paraphrase the situation, Barrick didn't feel like they were being fair or reasonable or really even listening to the accommodations Barrick was willing to make. And so Barrick has taken things into their own hand by going through international arbitration. So here's the press release from Barrick. Barrick Gold Corporation today confirmed that its operating entities in Mali, namely Société des Mines de Loulo SA and Société des Mines de Gounkoto SA, have submitted a request for arbitration to the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID, in accordance with the provisions of their respective mining conventions with the state of Mali, to address matters of disagreement regarding the Loulo-Gounkoto complex. This step reflects Barrick's commitment to adhering to establishing processes for resolving disputes in a fair and transparent manner. The arbitration mechanism, provided for under the Somilo and Gounkoto mining conventions with the state, has previously proven to be an effective tool for reinforcing partnerships and finding mutually acceptable solutions through an independent and competent authority. Quote, over its nearly 3 decades of operating in Mali, Barrick has consistently demonstrated its long-term commitment to the country and its people. While this process is ongoing, Barrick remains open to continued dialogue with the government to resolve these issues amicably and ensure the long-term success of the Loulo-Gounkoto complex, end quote, said Mark Bristow, Barrick president and CEO. For a company and a CEO that didn't look like they had too many options, it seemed like a pretty good move. Because it seemed to me, to editorialize here, that the military junta in Mali was more than happy if Barrick just decided to pick up and leave. We're going to shake you down and we're just going to offer unreasonable demands here, almost as if they just wanted them, again, to leave. What do you do in that situation where employees are being taken seemingly at random and arrested? We saw it with Resolute Mining as well, sounding like they jailed the CEO and 2 executives for over a week in November. It kind of makes a lot of sense what Bristow has done, which he's basically brought in transparency, a third party, because now it seems to me it's going to be a whole lot harder for Mali to expropriate this mine. They now have the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, the ICSID, to deal with, and so whatever they do now will be under the spotlight of this Center for International Disputes. So maybe the junta still ignores the outside world and what, say, this dispute mechanism might say, but they're sure going to have a lot more attention on them. And so I think a pretty wise move, especially concerning the safety of the individuals who are working for the mine, as well as the people who've been arrested. Because now, again, all of this starts getting a whole bunch of other people involved, which is kind of what you do when you have disputes like this. What do? Bring in other people for transparency. So a pretty smooth move, I would say, from Barrick. And interestingly, we saw Orano follow suit, and this is December 23rd, from the Voice of Nigeria website. France Orano launches arbitration against Niger over mining license. So perhaps taking a page out of Barrick's playbook here, French nuclear fuel company Orano has opened international arbitration proceedings against Niger. I mean, this all makes a ton of sense to me from the mining company perspective, because really you're at the point where you're going to lose it. So before they announce the expropriation of the mine, maybe you take them to court first and you get everybody you possibly can involved, every international, dispute mechanism involved, in order to at least make it clear that if they decide to expropriate the mines, they're again going to be under a whole different spotlight, you might say, a whole different framework that they have to consider as far as what they're able to do, or at least what the world is going to be aware of as they run these Western miners out of these countries, right? Let's read a couple of lines. The move follows several months of unsuccessful attempts at mediation and conciliation after Niamey in June withdrew the license of Orano's subsidiary Iamgold. And scrolling down a bit, following years of delays, Niger had warned the license would lapse on the 19th of June unless work resumed at the site. Orano said the announcement of the withdrawal came after the company presented Niger with a concrete proposal to begin exploiting the uranium deposit at the site. Earlier this month, Orano said the authorities had seized control of its Sommer uranium mine, 63% owned by the French company and the rest by the state of Niger. Niger's military-led government, which took power in a coup in July last year, has stepped up pressure in recent months on foreign investors. So Orano following suit shortly after Barrick. Again, I would say a pretty wise decision. I mean, what else can you do other than, invite in other people to see what's going on here? It kind of makes sense to me. Let's continue. Just a couple of interesting articles here. NATO has released a list of 12 defense critical raw materials. And so this was just released on December 11th. NATO published a list of 12 defense critical raw materials essential for the Allied defense industry. These materials are integral to the manufacture of advanced defense systems and equipment. Aluminum, for example, is pivotal to producing lightweight yet robust military aircraft and missiles, enhancing their agility and performance. Graphite is crucial for the production of main battle tanks and corvettes due to its high strength and thermal stability. In submarines, graphite is used in the construction of hulls and other structural components, significantly reducing acoustic signatures and enhancing stealth capabilities. Cobalt is another critical material essential for producing superalloys used in jet engines, missiles, and submarines, which can withstand extreme temperatures and stress. The availability and secure supply of these materials are vital to maintaining NATO's technological edge and operational readiness. Disruptions in their supply could impact the production of essential defense equipment. Identifying these key materials is NATO's first step towards building stronger, better protected supply chains, crucial for Allied defense and security. This initiative is part of a roadmap endorsed by NATO defense ministers in June 2024 to protect Allied supply chains from disruptions that could affect NATO's deterrence and defense. The list was informed by the NATO Industrial Advisory Group using a defense capability-focused methodology. The public release of this list highlights NATO's commitment to support allies in securing essential materials for the development and delivery of Allied defense capabilities. So here are the critical raw materials that NATO says it needs for its defense, and this is the order. 1. Aluminum. 2. Beryllium. 3. Cobalt. 4. Gallium. 5. Germanium. 6. Graphite. 7. Lithium. 8. Manganese. 9. Platinum. 10. Rare earth elements. 11. Titanium. And 12. Tungsten. So very interesting there. And finally, this hasn't gotten a lot of press, so I thought I'd throw it in here. The Global Times, the Chinese website, the Global Times, is saying that BRICS are inviting 9 new BRIC partner countries in a kind of, quote, greater BRICS, end quote. And here are the countries. And of course, we've heard Trump talking about BRICS and trying to deter them from ditching the dollar. And so here's the quote from the Russian news agency TASS, who made the announcement. As of this time, confirmations of readiness to become a BRICS partner country have been received from Belarus, Bolivia, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Cuba, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan, end quote. From January 1st, 2025, they will officially acquire the status of BRICS partner country, but we expect that in the near future, responses will come from 4 more countries to which invitations were also sent. So 9 more invited to be partner countries, and 4 more were invited. So BRICS is growing, and of course, when you see these countries, you do think of the resources they might have, say Kazakhstan, Indonesia, Bolivia. So that is your look at the wider world. Once again, welcome to the show. We have Renaud Adams, CEO of Iamgold, who joins us to discuss the excellent year the company has had. A lot of things coming together for Iamgold this year, and Renaud also talks about his very interesting story from really studying engineering in metals and mining and working his way to the top of a significant gold company. So a wonderful show here. As we land on Christmas Eve here, again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all our listeners around the world. If you want to find us online, you can find us at northernminer.com. You can find us on X at northernminer, and on Instagram at The Northern Miner, and on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we also host these podcasts, and wherever podcasts are available, including Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And with that, let's turn to the news. And turning to the website, tiny but vital metals markets rush to adjust to Chinese clampdown. This is Bloomberg News, December 22nd. Chinese curbs on exports of 3 niche metals to the U.S. have already rattled the market. Now, a bigger clampdown looks set to have far-reaching ramifications for supply chains feeding American defense and chip-making industries. Beijing this month slapped a ban on U.S.-bound exports of gallium, germanium, and antimony in a tit-for-tat move in a technology trade war. The metals are important because they have crucial uses in many Western industries, from military tech to semiconductors to satellites. The ban may have been symbolic at first, given restrictions imposed more than a year ago had wiped out direct exports of Chinese gallium and germanium to the U.S. That pushed up prices and made it harder for traders to source buffer stocks, yet panic levels are rising, because this time Beijing could crimp supplies further with rules prohibiting foreign companies and countries from helping U.S. manufacturers to evade the controls. It seems to me China's wanted to do this for a long time, and the chips simply gave them the excuse. Continuing on, for instance, the measures could prevent international firms from reprocessing Chinese gallium, germanium, and antimony in third countries, and then selling those products into the U.S. And buyers of those metals, such as the chip, aerospace, and defense sectors, may have little choice but to try to use less, recycle more, or strike deals with the few Western companies who can potentially start new production. There are also worries that other critical materials could be targeted if tensions escalate, and China has warned about graphite. Chinese metal that has been reprocessed elsewhere and rerouted to the U.S. has offered a lifeline to American manufacturers, particularly in the gallium market. But those flows will probably dwindle as suppliers fear reprisals from Beijing, according to people with knowledge of the trade, who asked not to be identified due to the commercially sensitive nature of the matter. The tiny size of those markets and limited companies participating in them means such sales would be easy to track, and being blacklisted by China would have huge repercussions for firms involved, the people said. It will be relatively easier for China to stop gallium shipments via third countries given it's a niche market, said Uchi Wakaki, director of overseas business at Wing Company, Japan's largest importer of the metal. Wing's imports from China have halved this year due to the knock-on impacts of trade curbs, he said. The impact on supply chains will vary, but traders, analysts, and suppliers broadly expect Beijing's ban to materially tighten global markets and boost metal prices in the coming months. Prices are already high. Germanium, which is over 300 times more expensive than copper, and antimony have hit records, while gallium is at a 13-year high, data from Fastmarkets shows. Chipmaker Intel Corporation said the ban won't significantly threaten production given its global supply sources, but since last year's restrictions, several niche manufacturers in the sector have warned of risks for securing components or selling their products if they become more expensive to make. They include French night vision technology company Exosense SAS and Lumentum Holdings, which makes lasers for the semiconductor, defense, and renewable sector, AXT, a semiconductor manufacturer that produces gallium products in China to supply U.S. plants, said in some cases the government hasn't issued export licenses and shipments have been delayed. Scrolling down a bit, in the longer term, industry insiders say the challenge will be securing new or alternative supplies and finding refiners who can transform them into extremely pure forms that manufacturers need. There's also the question of whether China could target other commodities. It's a dominant supplier of dozens of critical minerals, but analysts and traders are focusing on one that have key implications in the defense sector, in which the U.S. doesn't produce in meaningful volumes. Possible candidates include hafnium, zirconium, tungsten, titanium, and indium, they said. And here's a quote from Ionut Lazar, principal consultant at researcher CRU Group. Quote, industries that have never had an issue around material availability are all of a sudden waking up to the fact that there might be one. For the smaller manufacturers who are really heavily reliant on the materials being available, almost regardless of the price, that's the concern, end quote. And then the article goes through gallium, germanium, and antimony in depth, and I highly recommend you check this out on mining.com. And we don't have time to go through all of it, but I will share the end of the antimony summary, and it's quite interesting. So referring to antimony, the few deposits developed in countries like Tajikistan, Myanmar, and Turkey aren't large enough to make up for the shortfall in Chinese supply, and the big worry is when and where any new mines will be found. The only known U.S. deposit sits in an abandoned gold mine in Idaho, and the U.S. Defense Department has supported developer Perpetua Resources to help start production. That could reduce America's antimony shortage, potentially contributing more than 30% of its needs. The problem is that development could take years, and much more is needed to plug the global shortfall. Many end users remain worried about supplies. Quote, at the time China made this announcement, we started getting an avalanche of calls from the Defense Department, end quote, said Gary Evans, head of United States Antimony Corp., which runs a smelter in Montana that's operating at about 50% of capacity due to a raw ore shortage. Quote, the hard part is finding supply. We've been on the phone the last 120 days with companies trying to find supply. End quote. So the rubber is hitting the road on antimony as well as in germanium and gallium, but quite a statement there. An avalanche of calls from the Defense Department on antimony. Continuing on, U.S. graphite miners ask Washington to impose 920% tariff on Chinese rivals. This is Reuters via mining.com. North American graphite miners asked the U.S. government on Wednesday to impose a tariff as high as 920% on Chinese suppliers of the battery metal in order to counter what they describe as Beijing's, quote, malicious trade practices, end quote. The move is the latest attempt by Western critical mineral suppliers to offset China's widespread control of the world's extraction and processing of the building blocks for electric vehicles and electronics. Graphite, the largest component by volume in an EV battery, can be synthetically produced or processed from naturally occurring sources. China is the largest producer of both types and earlier this month tightened exports of the metal to the U.S. Scrolling down a bit, an existing U.S. tariff of 25% on most Chinese graphite is, quote, far too low, end quote, and can be absorbed easily by Chinese rivals, the American Active Anode Material Producers Group wrote to U.S. officials. So currently, 25% export tariff, the graphite miners want a 920% tariff, over 9x. Continuing on, Australian graphite firms petition U.S. on alleged China dumping, so another accusation of dumping. This is Reuters via mining.com. I always say, just buy it. If China wants to sell the West graphite at bargain basement prices, or nickel, or any of these materials that we seem to desperately need, I don't know why they're not stockpiled and we have huge facilities. Seems like a pretty simple market solution. We'll just buy it all. We're not talking like huge amounts of money here. And, relative to the size of the US budget, you might as well just buy it. So let's see what Australia is saying, and this is Reuters via mining.com. Australia's Novonix said on Thursday it had joined a petition urging U.S. authorities to investigate China's alleged dumping of battery-grade graphite at unfair prices, potentially harming domestic producers. The battery metals and technology company has joined the American Active Anode Materials Producers, who we just read about, in filing the petition. Quote, the filing asserts China is harming the nascent domestic graphite industry by exporting artificially cheap battery-grade graphite into the U.S., denying North American producers a fair opportunity to enter the market, end quote, Novonix said in a statement. North American graphite miners asked the U.S. government on Wednesday to impose a tariff as high as 920% on Chinese suppliers of the battery metal to counter what they describe as Beijing's, quote, malicious trade practices. In a separate statement, Australia's Sierra Resources said its unit, Sierra Technologies, filed an anti-dumping and countervailing duty petition with the U.S. Department of Commerce and International Trade Commission. Sierra's petition, submitted in collaboration with the North American Graphite Alliance, seeks an investigation into Chinese exports of natural and synthetic graphite active anode material used in lithium-ion batteries. Now, interestingly, we have this other story from a week and a half ago. This is by Trish Saywell at the Northern Miner. Unrest pushes Sierra Resources to declare force majeure at Mozambique graphite mine. Allegation of fraud in Mozambique's general elections in early October have ignited protests and paralyzed mining operations across the country, including Sierra Resources' Balama graphite operation in the northern province of Cabo Delgado. So, we touched on the unrest in Mozambique in, I believe, October, and it continues. This is again December 13th. Production is seized and the Australian-based miner has defaulted on its loans with the United States International Development Finance Corporation and U.S. Department of Energy, the company said Thursday. Quote, nationwide protests associated with the electoral process is causing widespread disruptions throughout Mozambique, including at several mining operations, and, quote, Sierra Resources said in a release declaring force majeure at its mine site. Quote, circumstances surrounding the general election and the ongoing protests are significantly impacting national government operations and hindering the ability of district and provincial government authorities to resolve illegal protest actions at Balama, end quote. Finally, opposition parties have cited electoral fraud and other irregularities in the general election, which extended the majority of the ruling Frelimo party across national and provincial levels of government. The Mozambique Constitutional Court has yet to confirm the results. Frelimo has ruled the East African country since independence from Portugal in 1975. And there's a couple other paragraphs here that are definitely worth our attention here. Sierra's graphite mine, quote, is one of the world's few non-Chinese sources of natural graphite, end quote, BMO mining analysts commented in a research brief. The company also runs an anode material facility in the United States and has historically been considered a key supply link for the USA's battery value chain, end quote. BMO notes that high inventories and weak demand for graphite finds, however, have meant that the mine, quote, has been out of production since July, end quote. So we're seeing a lot of, yellow to orange flags on graphite here. We got red flags on germanium, gallium, and antimony. Now we're getting yellow to orange flags on graphite. Continuing on, we have a news story from today also out of Mozambique. Gemfields says unrest could disrupt Mozambique ruby mine. This is Reuters via mining.com. Gemfields Group said on Tuesday disruptions were possible at its largest ruby mine in Mozambique after people torched buildings and villages nearby in escalating unrest linked to October's disputed elections. Mozambique's top court on Monday confirmed long-ruling party Frelimo's victory in the election that has sparked protests by opposition groups that say the vote was rigged. Gemfield said in a statement that, quote, groups associated with the illegal mining and trading of rubies have taken advantage of the political unrest, end quote. It said instigators had on Monday set fire to the police station in Numan Humbir, a village close to Gemfield's Montepuez Ruby Mining Limitada in the northern Cabo Delgado province. And finally, Gemfields is quoted as saying, quote, based on the trajectory of the ongoing situation, there may be interruptions to MRM's mining operations resulting from this unrest, end quote. So more troubling stories out of Mozambique. And just a few headlines here. Lithium Americas and GM close joint venture for Thacker Pass mine. This is Reuters via mining.com on December 23rd. Lithium Americas said on Monday it had closed its joint venture with U.S. automaker General Motors to develop the Thacker Pass mine in Nevada. The miner's CEO, Jonathan Evans, said the company is expected to make a final investment decision on the project in early 2025. Under the JV agreement, first announced in October, GM would contribute $625 million to the project to gain a 38% stake in Thacker Pass in the form of cash and a credit facility. The deal's closing provides another boost for the giant lithium mine, months after the U.S. finalized a $2.26 billion loan for the Nevada project. Another headline here, nickel price hits 4-year low as gloom offsets potential Indonesia cuts. And we are talking less than $7 a pound on nickel. So nickel continues to fall. As it says here, nickel hit a 4-year low as a lackluster outlook from the Federal Reserve for next year outweighed the possibility of sharp mining cuts in Indonesia. And another nickel-related story, Indonesia weighs deep cuts to nickel mining to boost prices. This is Bloomberg via mining.com. And of course, we saw that with Kazakhstan and uranium. Quite a few years ago, they oversupplied the market and realized it wasn't really to their interest to do that. So let's see what is going on in nickel. Indonesia is considering deep cuts to nickel mining quotas as it seeks to boost slumping prices of the battery metal, according to people familiar with the matter. The Energy and Mineral Resources Ministry is looking at lowering the amount of nickel ore allowed to be mined next year to 150 million tons, said the people, who asked not to be named as the deliberations are private. This would be a sharp drop from 272 million tons this year. Scrolling down a bit, any move to restrict nickel mining by President Prabowo Subianto, who took office in October, would mark a departure from the previous administration, which encouraged a rapid build-out of local smelting capacity. However, the government has been managing the amount of ore its miners produce this year to try and balance the market. So quite a huge story this year in nickel. Continuing on, iron ore price weakens as Australia flags return to sub-$100 prices. This is Bloomberg News via mining.com. So, as you're going to see in metal prices, there seems to be orange flags suggesting potential recession. We've seen it before. When industrial metals start to move in unison downwards, it sometimes indicates a weakening of the global economy. And finally, El Salvador lawmakers overturn mining ban and win for president. This is Reuters via mining.com. El Salvador's legislature overturned a 7-year-old ban on metals mining on Monday, a move that President Nayib Bukele has pushed for to boost economic growth, but that environmental groups had opposed. El Salvador became the first country in the world to ban all forms of metals mining in 2017. Bukele, who took office in 2019, has called the ban absurd. All 57 of Bukele's allies in the Central American country's 60-seat legislature voted for the president's legislation to overturn the ban. Those are your news stories. Now, let's take a look at metal prices. And turning to metal prices, let's take a quick look at the bond market for context. The U.S. 10-year bond is yielding 4.63%. That is 0.25% higher than last week. U.S. 10-year bond yields up 0.25% on the week. And again, starting to approach that 5% area. The UK 10-year gilt is yielding 4.6%. That is up 0.08% from last week. The Italy 10-year bond is yielding 3.5%. That is 0.12% higher than last week. German's 10-year Bund is yielding 2.33%. That is 0.1% higher than last week. And the Japanese 10-year bond is yielding 1.07%. That is unchanged from last week. So U.S. bond yields really rising the most here. Turning to precious metals, gold is trading at $2,629.60 per ounce. That is $24 lower than last week. Silver is trading at $30.20 per ounce. That is 70 cents lower than last week. Platinum is trading at $945.60 per ounce. That is $11 higher than last week. And palladium is trading at $922 even. That is $8 lower than last week. So generally lower in precious metals, except for platinum. Turning to industrial metals, copper is trading at $4.03 per pound. That is down 12 cents on the week. And Dr. Copper threatening the $4 level. Iron ore is trading at $103.84 per metric ton. That is down $2 on the week. Aluminum is down a penny at $1.15 per pound. Lead is unchanged at 91 cents per pound. Nickel has broken through $7 to trade at $6.95 per pound. That is 25 cents lower than last week. Tin is at $13.01 per pound. That is down 19 cents from last week. Cobalt is unchanged at $11.02 per pound. Lithium is lower at $10.35 per kilogram. That is 9 cents lower than last week. Uranium is at $73.30 per pound. That is $3 lower than last week. And zinc is also lower at $1.36 per pound. That is 2 cents lower than last week. Zooming out, it seems to me that metals are generally moving lower, suggesting to me, particularly industrial metals, Dr. Copper at $4, iron ore threatening $100, nickel breaking through $7. So these industrial metals working lower, again, is this an orange flag on the economy? And those are your metal prices. Coming up, I'm very pleased to welcome Renaud Adams, President and CEO of Iamgold, to the Northern Miner podcast for the very first time. We discuss the company's banner year in the gold industry, outperforming GDX and stock doing quite well. I ask Renaud what the company has done right. I also ask him about his super interesting career and how he got to where he is, and really a story of someone who made his way up through the industry to now lead a significant gold mining company. A fascinating story from one of the lights of the industry. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you on the other side. Joining us today, I'm very pleased to welcome to the Northern Miner podcast for the very first time, Renaud Adams, President and CEO of Iamgold. Renaud, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Adrian, for having me today. Pleasure.
Thank you for coming on. It was great to meet you at the International Metals Symposium in London. And we just had a little conversation. I asked if you'd come on, and you graciously accepted. So thank you for making the time for our podcast. I was just looking at Iamgold online. It's been a good year for Iamgold. Tell us, is that how you see it?
I like to say that I see it as an excellent year. We knew 24 would be some sort of a pivotal year for us. And it's kind of started, late 23. We had advanced almost to the finish line, the constructions of Côté Gold in Ontario. We'll talk more about it, but, mega project, one of the largest gold mines to be operating in Ontario. Second, third largest gold deposit already, and continue to grow. So we ended the year extremely strong at our operating asset, Essakane in Westwood. But I would say more importantly, we managed to advance a lot of the construction. So we entered 24 extremely well positioned and started the pre-commissioning of the Côté Gold, and early in the year, mid-January, by late March, we were already at the first gold. Work hard for 3-4 months and put the commercial behind us, and the asset continue, to perform well and advance well. And we're there. Like, our objective is to exit the year at 90% of the nameplate. So we enter 25 extremely strong. So this is where we are now, finishing, fixing some nits here and there. So extremely good for the Côté Gold. So really looking forward for 2025. In Burkina Faso, we all know the situation is not always easy, but we've been working extremely well with the government in place, and on the security side, securing the goods, hitting the site. We go for roughly 17 months now without any interruptions in Burkina Faso. It was tough somewhat, in the early 23, but by the second half of 2023, we had already put in place a very good systems to secure the goods, through convoy and military protections and so forth. And the asset has been operating in 24 extremely well. No disruptions. As I said, we hit the 400,000 ounces again for 6th year in a row, and managed to drill within the fence and keep growing our resource base. So couldn't be happier. And I think we're entering 25, feeling very confident for another solid year in Burkina Faso in strong free cash flow. My big story to me, is our Westwood mine in Quebec. I know Côté Gold is a big asset for us and will be a game changer for us. But the Westwood, the story, the turnaround after so many years of difficult mining and stability, we managed in 2021 to restart on a different technical approach and different mining method. And by the end of 23, it was very promising that the asset could eventually turn into a solid free cash flow operation. And here we are. And 24 was a wonderful year for Westwood. should hit their high production guidance, has generated and on its way to generate probably between 50 and $75 million. So we see the asset down the road for many years of solid productions and free cash flow as well. So where does that put us? With the gold price, of course, we all enjoy the higher gold price. But in the last 6 months, we've been capable to deliver our prepay ounces at Côté Gold on the solid free cash flow generated by the two other assets. And since we're turned commercial production at Côté, the asset became also a positive cash flow. So we're now in a very well positioned. We have three assets. By July next year, we should have already completed all the prepaid and put this behind us. At that stage, we see our company producing in a run rate of 850,000 ounces attributable to us and all free cash flowing. So we couldn't be happier. I think 24 was a pivotal year, very strong year. As you mentioned, on the equity side, the shares have performed extremely well to date. But I do not see this as a one-time event. As a matter of fact, I see 25 extremely strong as we establish and position Côté in a 400,000 plus. Put the prepaid, as I said, turn the company for the first time as a global free cash flow. So a lot more to come, but 24 so far, knock on wood. Couple of weeks to go. Definitely the strongest year for, the last many years for this company.
It has been a great year. I mean, you compare it to the GDX, it seems to be outperforming. So it's almost like the stars have aligned, but of course, usually it's more than luck. So what do you attribute this outperformance to? What decisions has the company made in order to find itself here? Like, what's the wisdom, in a sense, that occurred to find itself here?
Well, rest assured, I appreciate, 24 was somewhat, a pivotal year, and we've seen a lot of changes to take place. But one thing that hasn't changed in this company for many years, and as I like to say, it's really all about people. We do have very strong operational team at the three assets. The commissioning so far at Côté has been possible, and that speed because of the people we have there. Burkina Faso may seem like a complicated place, but the truth is we have enormous depth there. The team running the mine, our CEO, Vice President of Operation, have both operated the mine in the past. So when it comes to the confidence we have in operating an asset in Burkina Faso, it's really all about people. We're extremely pleased with the team, the work we're doing with the community and the government. And that cannot happen just by showing up there and try to change things overnight. It's been possible because of the depth of what we have there. It's the same story for Westwood. A new team, new management, new technical people and approach. And here we are today, with a very successful turnaround. So I would say in general, a big decision that was made prior for me to rejoin the company in April 23rd, a difficult one, but necessary one, was the sale of what we would call the non-core asset. We divested our West African project and exploration asset. And we also made the tough decision to sell the Suriname, the Rosebel gold mines located in Suriname. So all that has allowed the company to move on late 22 or at least 23 with our partner Sumitomo in Japan. So we got a kind of a deal, allowing them to temporarily step in with another 10%, which we just repurchased back from them in November. So again, it speaks of the people. You can't make those things happen if you don't have the right people in the right seats. And this is, you talk about the wisdom. Yeah, it's a bit of a mix of the wisdom and expertise and how we work with people. And this is, I think, what makes a big difference is I feel that our partner and us work extremely well together in all aspects of the business. So definitely the decision to secure the financing of Côté was a big decision. Tough to make, but a big one. The rest belonged to the execution and the quality of the people we have in this company, from board down to asset level.
Interesting. And so divesting the non-core assets, as you say, a key decision here, especially from maybe the market's point of view.
It's a complete shift because I was with this company back in time, from 2007 to 2011. And this company was growing a lot internationally, So we had big vision, to grow West Africa, and to continue to grow in South America as well. We have an exploration project in Brazil as well. And then come the transactions where the company acquired in April 2012 the Côté Gold project. And from that day, we knew that eventually it was a matter of time that we're going to turn with a much more focused approach in Canada. Meanwhile, situations in West Africa maybe did not improve, but the other way around. So Côté Gold came in an absolute strategic and critical time for us. It was a tough decision, but it was a decision that we know would create a lot of value for our shareholders. So today, we have two mines in Canada, one almost commissioned, almost there with a lot of organic growth attached to it. We're sitting on roughly 20 million ounces of gold, and it continues to grow. So we can only see, a great future. So yes, it's a different approach, a different vision. Is from moving from international visions to more Canadian focused at a time where we all know how desirable are the assets in Canada, and even more so when you own an asset like Côté Gold. So it's quite a shift. Definitely the main reason for me to come back, the chance for me to lead a company that has such a future in Canada was something I just could not pass on. It was so exciting.
Well, I want to ask you actually about your career trajectory. I mean, it does seem like you've worked your way up in the mining industry, but just before we get to that, I'm curious, how do you approach from a strategic, almost philosophically, say, working in Burkina Faso, as you mentioned, West Africa is a tricky place, and each country within there is different. I mean, you're not in Mali, for example. Like, you're in Burkina Faso, it's a different situation. How do you just approach that on a big picture level? How do you approach working with the community, working with the government? What is the philosophy here?
I think back in time, when I was back in time with the company, we proud ourselves of our ability to make a difference in life of people. And this is how we approach it. So when you go overseas and you open up mining in countries that are maybe not like totally, ready for it. So you're coming in, like Suriname was my experience, with this company where we're the first gold mine over there. And you don't take an approach with the view that you're going to run this with 90% expatriate and 10% in, local. So you come in with a vision that within a few years, you're going to make a huge difference for the countries, for the communities, for the people, obviously, and try to make it as much as possible and as fast as possible with a very big stamp as more like local. And you bring the expertise, you bring the know-how, you bring all that, you bring the commitment. But at the end of the day, what truly matters is what are you committed to for the people in the country, right? This is the approach. And not different of what we try to do to Canada, but when it comes to foreign countries and host countries, you know that the end result will be much more impactful for the communities where you work with. So we've started to operate mines overseas, if I recall, like in the mid 2000, and the transactions with Cambior in 2006 brought the Rosebel gold mines, and eventually we acquired from Moorzone the Essakane mine and repeated and bettered the model. But our model has always been, we want to be the best in creating values in the countries where we do business. Now, I know a lot of other companies would have the rather same statement, but it comes to your commitment, right? And if there is one thing that I was extremely proud when I was with this company is really the difference that we've made in life of people. And it continues. Unfortunately, we have to leave Suriname, but our presence in Burkina Faso is extremely strong. It is the same thing. You work with the communities, but you don't work with the communities with the view just like, oh, we're going to offer jobs, and is how you've seen the communities grow around you as well. And the impact, of course, and the gold mining in Burkina Faso has a huge impact, social, economic, and all that. So once you do all this, together with trust is everything. If you step in a country, you must establish relationship, partnership, and trust, not as an obligation, but as the right thing to do. And I think this is probably what has made the most difference is our approach is not based on obligation to do it, but on the right things to do. And sometimes, it's not easy. And you need to understand, it's like, as a chief constant would say from Matagami First Nations, we're in a marriage. So when you're in a marriage, you need to pay attention to what matters to the other. And it's not just a document sometimes or an IBA. It is beyond the contract. It comes from your willingness. It comes from your commitment to make a difference. And that aspect has always worked. So when we decided to build Côté Gold, we shifted to Canada, to Ontario, but we came with the exact same mindset. And if one thing's done, at Rosabelle and the Sakane, we've operated mines of 400,000 ounces and with about the same volume. So it was nothing new on the technical side, besides some technology that we added and so forth. But the most important thing is, how do we want to work now? This is our backyard, but this is our model. How do you import that model and back to where you started? And this is with exact same approach with our partner First Nations, our partner Sumitomo, with the government. We work with the exact same commitment to pay attention to what matters and do the right thing. And that has helped us a lot in establishing at a record time, if you will.
Indeed, it seems like the long-term approach, to actually deliver something, have the reality in mind beyond the words, as you say, to paraphrase.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's really all about people. We all want the same thing. Everyone wants success. Everyone wants, like impact, social, economic, and take care of environment and so forth, and allow, to grow, communities to grow. If it's done in the right way, everyone wins. You can't lose. You can lose when you truly engage in partnership rather than contractual obligation.
Okay, excellent. Now, I'd like to pivot just a little bit to your career. It's a pretty interesting business career. You come from Quebec, as far as I understand. You did a degree in engineering in mining and minerals. Could you tell us just a little bit about your trajectory and how you got to where you were in fairly brief order, if you can?
Yeah, mining was not necessarily my first career path, I don't have anyone in my family. I don't come as, following the steps and stuff like that. I actually went to university and first in the School of Actuary. And at the second year, decided I was maybe not what I really wanted to do. But those years, behind me has allowed me to enter the mining degree already with quite a bit of done already. So that's allowed me to graduate in the mining extraction, but also mineral processing. So typically after the second year, you kind of pick a little more what you want to do. You want to do more mining or you want to do more mineral processing. And I was blessed to have the chance to do a little more of both and graduated with a little more of both, which to me have shifted and shaped my career. I started in Quebec. People would know me more in Quebec as a more mineral processing side, even though I did a bit of the constructions, but mineral processing was more. There is one thing I always knew. I wanted to see the world. That was clear from day one. And I knew mining would allow me and provide those opportunities. So at the very early days, like the second, third year of my career, I moved overseas. So what I thought would be 6 months, that was probably something like 14, 17 years. Started in Costa Rica. And at the very early days, I was asked, to play a little bit more management than technical. Learned the Spanish, met my wife, and the first kid was born in Latin America and then Chile. And one thing led to another. So increasing role and became operation manager and eventually was given the chance to run the mine. My second son was born in Chile. So the family became very international. And from there, we went to Honduras, where I was given, from day one, the opportunity to run a pretty big underground mine. And Honduras has been the representative of the company in country. So that's opened up different skills and working closely with the government and making a difference in how we run the business in countries. And from there, I was given the opportunity to go to Rosebel Gold Mines and come back to the gold sector with a large scale operations at about the same role, general manager, but vice president in country. And then I would say I kind of really raised the bar and was more comfortable in that role. And work even more closely with governments. At the time when I joined, there was more a rotation, like kind of a fly in, fly out. And we've changed that and we established base in Paramaribo and the management moved and was living there. So we incorporated the community for the first time. And I've done that for about 4 years until I was really given the chance to join the corporate at that stage with the company. I think at that stage, I knew that I wanted to be a CEO. I think at the early days of my career, I could see myself more as a technical guy, very operational driven. But when I was given at the early days in Costa Rica and then Chile and then Honduras, the opportunity in Suriname to step in and use more of my management skill, I think I discovered something myself that I probably didn't know at the early days, that I was something that was big in me, like the leadership side and making a difference and working and creating a vision and embarking in full organizations and pulling all in the right directions became my passion. So I moved to corporate with the view to explore this even further. And that was really the start of my second phase of my career, was to become an executive, a corporate, understanding the game, the corporate game, and so forth. Until I was given my chance, not at Iamgold, but through an opportunity to run my first company, Richmond Mine. Was a very good success, very operational, very technical. It wasn't a financial type of turnaround. It was really taking a great resource base and making a great operating story. And eventually sold it to Alamos. The Island Gold Mine continued to be a very successful story. And after taking a bit of a break and reconsidering what I wanted to do next, I was given the opportunity to join Iamgold, which that one was completely different. It was a lot of technical aspect, but it was a perfect opportunity for me to leverage more capital markets and financial world and to turn a very difficult financial situations, work with the CFO, of course. But I think on that one, I knew the leadership was something that was really important to me. But I think what I've learned in Iamgold is that I could also work extremely well on the capital market side and the M&A side of the business. And we were very good, with the teacher, in Ontario and so forth, and come up with very creative transactions and eventually turn the financial situation around. And I'm very pleased that Iamgold today is a very good performer on the TSX and continue to do so. So at that point, I knew that I had the baggage, to do, what I want to do next. But when I was giving the chance for Cote and Iamgold, it's this is like where you put all your skills, all your experience, and you go for it. And that was a perfect place for me to land.
Beautiful. I mean, what a career. And so just curious, you studied mineral processing. How important has that been throughout your career? In a sense, what are you seeing now? Are you seeing transformations in mineral processing because of new technology? Could you talk about that side of things?
I like to say that the strategic approach belongs really to more maybe the mining side. Like every deposit has a story. It's a unique story. It may look like it's all open pit or underground. No, I think every deposit has. And how you pick the mining method, how you decide, you're going to operate this, how you're going to move the material around would dictate, most of the project, success, if you will. But the mineral processing makes a huge difference. Just a little nudge on the recovery sides of how you process and all that has a lot of value attached to it. So the fact that I was very comfortable on both, I think has a big difference. Not that I feel I'm the only one in the industry that does those. I know other people that has the chance to work in both. But because I have the chance to work from rock to mill, even in exploration as well in Costa Rica, I think that's bring me the ability to step in an operations or an opportunity and really see from A to Z, where. So I wouldn't say mining more than mineral processings or explorations and all, but the full understanding from rock to mill could only help you to come up with what would be the best vision or scenario, if you will, for a very unique opportunity. And this is probably more as a global approach, I would say, more than picturing in a mineral processing and so forth. Because gold technically is pretty standard how you would process. There is little detail here and then, but the base metal, I worked in the base metal as well. I worked in industrial mineral as well. I skipped a bit of those, but the processing may have a little bit more, especially when you separate different metals and so forth. So I would say in my career in the base metal, this is where I've used maybe more of the processing side. And in the gold sector, it's more about the mining. It's all about the volume and moving a lot of material at the lowest cost possible.
Okay, excellent. So this is super interesting. And regarding the technology, I mean, because you've worked in the industry for a while, I mean, what are you seeing now? Like, are you excited? For example, I'm hearing from all sorts of startups that are, querying the program saying, hey, what are you guys up to? We're working on this, special new technology. You hear about automation in mines. Like, what can you tell us as someone who's, running a mining company? What can you tell us about the latest things that you're excited about from a technological perspective?
First thing first is because I had the chance to experience at Côté Gold, is the use of technology for autonomous. And I knew the autonomous haulage, of course, were existing in large scale mining. There was nothing new about it. What was new is when would be the first North American gold operations, large scales, to start operating from day one using autonomous. And that has been a big differentiator for us. And a lot of aspect on the health and safety aspect. We all know that there is a bit of a shortage here and then, in the market. So you could offset this, you could optimize your operation. So it's kind of scratching just the tip of the iceberg. But for us, it was really setting the tone about what is our commitment. And I really like this approach. And we're very, very happy, with the result of it. But where I think things must go and what I'm the most excited about is eventually how could you apply AI to the mining industry? This is I wish I would not retire from this industry before I had the chance to see it. In my past life at Iamgold, we did test the use of AI for exploration targets and was very successful and it continued to be very successful. But where I really see AI is, let's face the reality, the universities are not, increasing, the amount of graduates and so forth. So it's becoming more and more challenging every year, engineering, geology. But on the other side, you look at how we operate, and we do use a lot of the time of the professional to do things that we could do differently using. I think you could offset significant aspect of shortage of professional by using technology. And from exploration to validating data and turning this into block model, and from eventually there, how could you build reliable and very optimized mine plan? The margin is very, very thin, right? So you're talking about a few cents here and there per ton. There is no human that could run 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 mine plan on a very short notice. It's just not possible. But the technology could. And I know there were instances in the past where companies have tried to, maybe it was the early days, but this is where I think we could make a huge difference, because for sure, there is always the most optimal way to plan and to execute and to make decision pretty much at every single truck of how you move it and how you position things. But again, try to do this on a daily basis using only human power, you're limiting yourself. And I think the technology is there. This is something we definitely want to explore down the road at Iamgold, Côté Gold, and also the other asset is the use and incorporations of the AI in our strategic and execution. And I'm a strong believer in it, and I think it would make a huge difference in the industry. But it's something that it's still not quite established, but this is something we want to be a player.
Indeed. It seems like the whole paradigm of how mining is done is in a process of being reassessed with these kind of new technologies.
Because at the end of the day, you use existing information, whether it's your geology, your structural, your database, your mapping at the face, your economics, your distance. your rehandling, you move a ton, depending on how you move it, if you have to rehandle or not. You have like 10, 15, 20 parameters. But this is all information that whether exists comes from engineering principle, a geology principle, and so forth. So how could you all incorporate this? And data, capturing data is everything. But how can you all transfer this? And instead of using one person to put the puzzle together and look at different options, how could you create hundreds, thousands of options and always make the right decision at every single moment? I call that a kind of a life of mine, if you will. Is that possible? I believe so. A lot of work to be done, but I think that would shape the economics of the industry.
Okay, excellent. And final question, just bringing it back to the company and its North American operations, I guess Canadian, it seems like that's where the growth is going to be for this company, or at least perhaps the emphasis is placed a little bit on Canada. Is that correct? And how do you see the outlook for the company in that regard?
This is definitely the case. As we grow at Côté Gold, we think we can continue to extend the life of mine in Burkina Faso. That's not a point. We keep drilling. We keep saying, potential. 25 is a year of execution and high cash flow. So we address the balance sheet starting mid next year. But if I look down the road, yes, I firmly believe that we could extend the life of mine in Burkina Faso on a step by step. We know that our Westwood mine has some organic growth attached, but it's really all about Côté. We built Côté. The decision to spend $3 billion was based on the scenario of 7.5 million ounces of reserve. By the time we built and we started commissioning the asset, we were sitting on 20 million ounces. So if you ask me, I would say yes. It's all about Côté. It's all about unlocking the full potential. So from the full ramp up to 36,000 tons a day, then we're going to start at a very low capital. How could we start unlocking this? We have the intentions to update a new technical report in the market by late 2026. That would be based on the full picture. So definitely as we advance in time, I could only see our Canadian presence growing, mostly around the Côté Gold. So by definition, we'll reduce the exposure outside of Canada while you unlock the potential in Canada. Down the road, we'll see if something else is possible elsewhere, but our focus and we're all about Côté for while we hopefully continue to extend the life of mine in Burkina.
Excellent. Renaud Adams, President and CEO of Iamgold. Thank you for joining us and sharing all of your perspective and insights on this week's Northern Miner podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again to Renaud Adams for appearing on this week's Northern Miner podcast. And thank you, dear listener, for continuing to support this program. If you want to help out the podcast, please leave us a review in the Apple Podcast directory. Share it with your friends. Until next week, have a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and take care.